Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net and welcome to today's tutorial. In part 2 of the Demon series, I'll be showing you my process for drawing up a sexy, sassy Demoness and how I took it from the initial foundations, drafted up the design and refined it, and took it all the way through to some finished, polished comic book pencils. I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so now we've finished off our demon minions, so let's move on to our Demoness, I guess you could say. We'll call her a Demoness because she is a sexy lady demon, and of course, at this point in time, she's a very, very rough sketch, and I'm just going to build right over the top, starting with the facial features. You can see I've placed in the eyes. I always like to start with the eyes of my characters first because they're kind of the windows into the soul, or in this case, the windows into the demon. and I've placed in the nose, the mouth, and of course now I'm placing in the horns of the demon. And I wanted to go for a kind of a goat-looking head for this one, or really, I guess I don't know. I know that I've got these horns from somewhere. They look like those giant goats, not your regular everyday backyard goat. They're more of a mountain goat, I guess you could say, that you might find in the wild. And once I've got those established, now I'm just zooming in and starting to articulate some of the anatomy of her body. And you can see that I'm going for a nice feminine appeal to her overall anatomy. Placing in the breasts, the belly there, and just getting those key notes of anatomy placed in and ready to go so that I can build a sassy looking costume over the top of that anatomy. And really articulating how the anatomy of her arm is going to look and trying to get that anatomy looking as accurate as possible before I start to take the artwork any further, because it's important to have accurate anatomy if you are going to be building a costume over the top of the character, because if the anatomy is off, then the entire thing is going to be off and it just won't look right. And, that's part of our job as comic book artists, to make sure that what we're drawing is accurate and that it does look good, that it does look correct. So now I'm placing in the costume, or starting to design the costume for this lovely Demoness, and in all honesty, I'm not really sure what I'm going to go for at this point. I'm kind of making it up as I go, trying things out. And that's all part of the fun, right? You get to experiment a little bit, and I guess there's not a lot of pressure on me with this piece, and I do have the freedom to explore the design and to try things out, see what works, see what doesn't work, and I like to do it that way because that's when I'm having the most fun, when it doesn't have to look any particular way, when there's no pre-established rules that I need to stick to, and I can just go all out on the design. Now, for me, it's kind of a challenge here because I want to create a costume that looks super sassy and almost dominatrix-like, I guess. But I also want it to be semi-appropriate and appropriate enough, I mean, for public consumption. So I don't want to make it too over-sexy, just enough to kind of get the point across, I guess you could say, while still being semi-appropriate. And of course, as I do that, I'm trying to create a design which is actually going to look good. I just don't want to throw anything down. None of this it's not about being totally random. As much as I'm having fun and I'm enjoying the design process, I actually want to make sure that I'm keeping in mind the functionality of the outfit and how exactly it's going to work. Now, it may not look practical, but at the same time, it's less about how practical it looks in this situation and more about how it's going to fit onto her body. Does it actually look like a costume that she could put on? Now, of course, I have just erased it completely because I obviously didn't like the direction in which it was going, and I'm going to opt for something a little different this time around and try to go for a new approach, and that's often what I'll do. If a design isn't working, and I'm noodling at it for a long period of time and I'm just not getting anywhere, I'll just get rid of the whole thing and I'll start over and hope that the next time around it ends up working out. And of course, if it doesn't work out again, I'll just erase it and have another crack at it. And really, at this stage of the drawing, when it is so loose and so undefined, you can totally do that, especially if you're working digitally. But even if you're working traditionally, all you got to do is just get the eraser, erase those light lines that you may have placed in, and start again. And that's really, the point of keeping it this simple in the beginning, is so that you do have the freedom there to kind of try things out, and that you're not too confined or have to be too invested into one particular idea. Now, you'll notice this time around I have opted for a design which is a little bit more interesting for our outfit, and I think it's because I wanted to go for a look that appeared somewhat otherworldly. So it's kind of like this weird look between sci-fi and there's these kind of leather straps that you might see on characters like that have been designed for the Hellraiser series, for example. But yeah, as you can see, these are more than just leather straps that have been wrapped around this Demoness. Now we're getting into more of an otherworldly design, and she resides in the underworld, so who knows how they dress down there. I'm kind of making it up as I go, but the point is that I want to make it look just a little bit more complex and intricate than I had initially decided to do, and you can see that these particular look for the costume that I've decided to go for does in fact look somewhat almost sci-fi, I guess you could say. We've got a whole bunch of different interesting shapes that I've drawn in there for her breastplate and bra area. And, of course, as we go down the body, I'm placing in I do still have that strap-like aesthetic, that gothic kind of punk look, but at the same time, now I'm mixing it up a little bit by adding in some additional sci-fi aesthetics to that costume design, and just trying to make it look as though it's a little bit more, again, I'm trying to strike a balance here. I want it to look sexy. I want it to look relatable. I want the viewer to obviously look at it and know what's going on. And, of course, I want it to look gothic and otherworldly. So there's that. Now, I am still not happy with the way in which the boob area is looking, so I decided to erase the design work I had done there, take down the complexity a little bit and make it simpler to look at, and decided to just add in a kind of, I guess, lining to the top of the bra there and leave it at that. Really, not adding in a whole lot more complex detail. And maybe I'll go back and kind of articulate some more of the design work around that area, but for now, I'm just going to keep it as that, because it's, I'm guilty of overdoing it. And even for me to be able to kind of erase that and hold back on some of those details, hey, that can take a lot sometimes, but I guess when it comes to detailing and rendering and the amount at which you do add into your artwork, it is important to make sure that you're keeping a balance and that you're using it strategically only to really articulate the things that you need to articulate. Because if you start to render and detail everything out, then it's just going to end up flattening out the entire image, and we don't want that. So now you can see me tweaking the anatomy of the character, and I've flipped the canvas because I've noticed that there is problems within the overall anatomy of that character, which is why I'm erasing it now and kind of throwing in some new arms there. And, sometimes that's just going to have to happen in order to get the artwork looking correct. These mistakes do fly under the radar sometimes, and they're not always obvious and easy to catch, but that's one of the reasons in which I like to actually flip the canvas around so that I can get a fresh perspective on how the artwork is coming together, and really it helps me to spot out where those mistakes are occurring. If I feel like something doesn't look right in the artwork, that may not necessarily mean that I know exactly what it is that's throwing everything off, but if I flip that canvas around, there's a good chance I'm going to spot out the perpetrator, the thing about the artwork that is messing it up. So now I've got most of the anatomy articulated, around the arms, around the chest area, and of course around her belly. There's some subtle anatomy that's been hinted with some very fine rendering work. But what I'd like to just point out here is that in comparison to our ugly minion that we did up in the last lesson, she's got relatively little detail upon her body. And the reason for that is twofold. She's not as ugly as this disgusting looking minion, and she's not as creaturely looking, and of course, she is a woman. And in order to ensure that we're preserving that feminine essence, that feminine elegance, we need to make sure that we're not overloading her anatomy with detail, because the more detail we add in there, the more we refine those muscles, the more manly or masculine she is going to look, or older, or just plain darn gritty and dirty. So, make sure that when it comes to defining female characters, whether they be female demons, creatures, or what have you, that you are trying to get across that more feminine look, that more feminine aesthetic by keeping tabs on how much detail you're including throughout their design and throughout their anatomy. Now, as for the design itself and the costume elements, you'll see that as I add in the horns here and as I detail out the wings, I'm adding a whole lot of detail to those various elements and really making them as articulate as I possibly can. Now, that adds contrast and it adds a lot of detail, but it doesn't destroy the femininity of the character that I'm creating. Instead, it creates, again, a really nice contrast between that clean-looking anatomy and the gritty, detailed, ugly-looking creaturely elements that have been built upon her, such as the horns and these wings that I'm placing in. And of course, the costume itself, if you were to squint your eyes, does add a slightly darker tone to the body and just helps to break up the image a little bit. And that's really, one of the roles in which at least rendering will play within my artwork, because I will, of course, use rendering to help to present the lighting conditions within my artwork, to help me describe the various forms throughout the character. But mostly, on top of that, I'm also adding in rendering to help to create a little bit of contrast in there, to show varying values within the different tones in the artwork. Now you can see me extending those horns down a little bit just to make them look a whole lot more badass than they were looking, and to make them look very dangerous on top of that as well. And of course, you can see me adding in some additional costume elements around her forearms and around her upper arm. Again, trying to keep in with that new sci-fi, otherworldly aesthetic that I recreated the rest of the costume in. And now I'm adding in some details to those horns that I just extended downward, and to really, blend them in, of course, with the rest of the horn that I've already created. And you can see that I've gone for a very kind of solid bone-like articulated structure that is quite intricate for those horns. And, as far as I can remember, I was just kind of coming up with that out of my mind as I worked and making it up as I went. But, when it comes to those types of things, sometimes I do like to jump online and collect some reference material and to really help to inspire exactly what those details are going to be, rather than just kind of making them up. And, I have my good days, I have my bad days where I'm relatively feeling super creative, and other days where I'm kind of, there's just nothing coming out. And sometimes I got to put something in order to actually come up with a new design which is going to be interesting looking. And, I find that sometimes you do need to feed your brain with inspiration for it to have something to work with, so that you can ultimately, create something out of that. Oftentimes, the only thing sitting inside your brain is going to be fairly generic and fairly mundane. Unfortunately, our brains don't really hold a lot of creativity by default. We need to kind of look at things, look at other people's artwork, look at other elements throughout the world, and of course, look back over some of our old artwork to remind us of the creative potential that we have. But at the end of the day, creativity is not innate within us, I don't believe, because otherwise, everybody would just be coming up with brand new ideas. But every idea is built off of another pre-existing idea. There's always something that is feeding that creativity and helping to generate it in the first place. So, of course, that's why I use references, to make sure that my drawing is actually looking accurate and to give me ideas for the drawing itself, to make it more interesting and to articulate the individual elements that are going to be found within it. So, I mean, that's all I've got to say about that. And now I'm jumping onto the wings, and really, once I've finished this wing, this will be pretty much a wrap. But you can see me placing in this kind of bone-like structure or a skeletal look for the actual bones of the wing, and then I'm just going to pull the actual skin between each one of those bones across those individual fingers of the wing, and try to make them look as kind of creepy as I possibly can. And that really does add a creepy element to this design, which is important because, yes, she's a beautiful looking demon that is meant to seduce and to be alluring, but at the same time, she is a monster of the underworld, so I want to add in an additional level of creepiness through, these various detailed, disgusting-looking elements, such as the skeletal, messed-up-looking wings that are growing out of her back, and, of course, the horns that I've created for her, which look very interesting in terms of the way that they're growing off of her head, and I like the way in which I've blended the horn into her actual head, as though like the skull doesn't really end at the horns, they just kind of grow onto them. Or rather, the horns grow onto the skull and kind of merge in with the rest of the face. I like that. I think it looks disgusting, significantly horrifying, and that's exactly what I want to go for with this particular piece. So that's my female demon, and I hope you enjoyed that demonstration and that you got a lot out of it. Just a quick one today before we jump on to the demon portrait that we'll be covering next week, and I'm looking forward to that one, I must say. So again, thanks for watching, stay tuned, and I'll catch you next time. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts in the comment section below this video, and most importantly, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more comic art tips, tricks, and tutorials. And of course, if you'd like to be kept in the loop on up-and-coming articles, tips and tricks, and updates from howtodrawcomics.net, head on over to the site and subscribe. Oh, and one last thing, we've also got a new community section over at the howtodrawcomics.net website where you can sign up, log in, and start posting your artwork and sharing it with your fellow comic artisans to get feedback and to, of course, showcase your artwork with like-minded individuals. So until next time, I'll catch you later, and take care.